When I saw my best friend's perfume on my husband's collar, I told myself it was a coincidence. But deep down I already knew. The smell of jasmine had always reminded me of her, of summers spent laughing over coffee, of late talks about everything and nothing. It was her signature, the kind of scent that lingers, gentle, comforting, unmistakable. That night as I leaned closer to hug my husband, that same scent brushed against me. Soft, sweet, familiar. I froze. He didn't notice, or maybe he pretended not to. He just mumbled something about being late for a meeting and walked into the shower. But I stood there in the dim light of our bedroom, holding his shirt in my hands, my stomach twisting into something cold and sharp. There are moments in life that split you, before and after. That was mine. Before that night, everything looked perfect from the outside. I had been married to Adel for 12 years. We had built a quiet, steady life together. Nothing extraordinary, but solid. He worked in finance. I managed a small art studio from home. Our days followed familiar rhythms: morning tea together, evening walks when his schedule allowed, Sunday dinners with his mother, who still called me Beta with affection. And then there was her, Nita, my best friend since college. The kind of woman who could light up a room without trying. Confident, spontaneous, and full of stories. When I first introduced her to Adel, I was proud. It felt good seeing two people I love get along so well. The three of us often spent weekends together. Dinners, movies, small get-togethers. Nita would tease me about being the old married couple, and Adel would laugh, calling her our third wheel. It became a running joke. I didn't know that joke would become prophecy. Looking back now, I can trace the fault lines, the subtle shifts I ignored, the texts that came late at night, the inside jokes they shared that didn't include me. The way Nita would sometimes say, "You're lucky, Santa. Men like Adel don't exist anymore." And I'd smile, not noticing the way her eyes lingered on him when she said it. At the time, I thought I was imagining things. I trusted them both too much to suspect betrayal. Nita had been there for me through everything. My father's passing, my miscarriage, my mother's illness. She was more than a friend, she was family. And Adel, well, Adel had always been quiet, steady, reliable. He wasn't the kind of man who flirted. He wasn't impulsive. He didn't even remember our anniversary half the time, but he remembered how I liked my tea. That's the kind of love I had. Simple, undramatic, comfortable. Maybe that's why I didn't notice when it started fading. That night, after I found the perfume on his collar, I sat in the darkened living room long after he fell asleep. The house was silent, except for the soft ticking of the wall clock. The jasmine scent still lingered faintly in the air, and I couldn't stop thinking about her. About the way she'd hugged me earlier that week when she came over for coffee, her laughter echoing in my kitchen like it belonged there. She had called Adel her brother-in-law. Smiling, playful, familiar. I didn't think twice when she handed him his tea, or when their fingers brushed lightly. But now, every memory replayed differently, like someone had dimmed the warmth and replaced it with something colder, something rotten. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. I told myself that friendship sometimes blurs lines. I told myself that I was tired, that maybe I was overthinking. But lies, even the ones you tell yourself, don't rest easy. The next morning Adel left early. When he kissed my forehead, his touch felt different. Hurried, distracted. After he left, I called Nita. She didn't pick up. Unusual for her. She was the kind of friend who answered every call with, "Tell me everything, I'm listening." I tried again in the evening, no answer. By the third day I convinced myself it was nothing. She was probably busy, but that small, stubborn ache in my chest wouldn't go away. So, I did something I hadn't done in years. I stopped by her apartment unannounced. The moment I reached her building, my hands started trembling. I don't know why. Maybe because a part of me already feared what I might find. When I knocked, her maid opened the door and hesitated. "Madam is not home," she said quickly, glancing back inside. But I could hear voices, faint, familiar. A man's voice, and then, laughter, her laughter. My heart began to pound in my ears. "Tell her Santa's here," I said, my voice low. The maid froze, unsure what to do. She opened the door just a little wider, and that's when I saw it. A man's jacket on the sofa. Adel's, the same gray jacket he wore to work every Friday. The room started spinning. My mouth went dry. I turned and walked away before she could say another word. I didn't need confirmation. I didn't need to see their faces together. The truth had already stepped out of the shadows, and I couldn't unsee it. That night when Adel came home, I said nothing. I couldn't. I sat across from him at dinner, watching him eat, hearing him ask about my day, pretending that everything was normal. He didn't know that with every bite he took, another piece of my heart turned to dust. And Nita, she didn't call that night. Or the next. But I didn't need her words anymore. Silence tells its own story. Before everything fell apart, my life looked ordinary, peaceful even. I used to think that was enough. Our home was a modest 2-story house tucked in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of Lahore. Mornings smelled of cardamom tea and the faint hum of the city waking up, street vendors shouting, the distant bark of stray dogs, the rhythmic clatter of Adil's spoon against his teacup. We'd sit across from each other at the small kitchen table. Him with the newspaper, me scrolling through my phone, often showing him a new art piece or a post from one of my students. I ran a small art studio for young women, teaching them how to paint, how to express what words couldn't. It was my passion, something I had built from scratch after years of convincing Adil that art could be more than a hobby. And Nita, she had always been my loudest cheerleader. We met in college, 2 young girls from very different worlds. I was quiet, cautious, raised in a home where emotions were often folded away neatly like laundry. She was the opposite, loud, impulsive, unfiltered. She'd show up to class late, wearing red lipstick and a grin that dared anyone to judge her. We became friends almost instantly. She had this way of making me feel seen, like I could step out of my shadow and laugh louder than I ever had. Years later, when I got married, Nita was my maid of honor. She cried more than my mother that day, held my hands during the rukhsati, and whispered, "You're lucky, Sana. You found someone who actually deserves you." Back then, I believed her. After my marriage, our friendship only deepened. Nita lived alone. She never married, said she was too free-spirited for commitment. Whenever Adil worked late or traveled for business, she'd come over with takeout and a bottle of Coke, insisting we have girls' nights. Sometimes she'd crash on our couch after a movie, too lazy to drive home. I never minded. Adil didn't either. He said she brought energy into the house. He wasn't wrong. Nita had this infectious energy. She made even the dullest evening feel alive. She'd tease Adil about his terrible taste in TV shows, joke that I had to train him better. And Adil, who was normally reserved, would actually laugh. Those rare, unguarded laughs that made his eyes crinkle. I used to love seeing them laugh together. It felt like family. Every Sunday we hosted dinner for Adil's mother, who was a widow and lived alone. She was a stern woman but kind at her core. Nita often joined those dinners, too uninvited, but always welcome. She'd help me in the kitchen, taste the gravy, whisper sarcastic jokes under her breath that made me giggle like a teenager. My mother-in-law adored her. "Your friend has good manners," she'd say. "You're lucky to have her." Yes, lucky. That word would haunt me later. Around the 8th year of my marriage, things began to shift in small, almost invisible ways. Adil's work became more demanding. He spent longer hours at the office, more business trips, more late nights. I didn't question it. We needed the money, and he'd always been responsible. But I noticed how distracted he had become. How he'd scroll through his phone at the dinner table, smiling faintly at something he never shared. Sometimes, when I asked who he was texting, he'd just say, "Work." I believed him, because that's what wives do when they trust their husbands. They believe. Around that time, Nita started visiting less often. She said her company had new clients, that she was swamped with deadlines. I missed her, but I understood. Or maybe I just told myself I did. One evening, after one of Adil's long days at work, Nita called. "Sana," she said, her voice bright as ever. "I'm near your place. Can I drop by?" "Of course," I said, smiling. "Adil just got home too. We'll order dinner." When she arrived, she looked different. Her hair was styled neatly, her perfume stronger than usual. She hugged me quickly, then turned to Adil. "You look exhausted," she said, her tone softer than usual. He chuckled. "You know how it is. Clients never sleep." I noticed the way she looked at him, not the teasing glance of a friend, but something quieter, admiring. It passed quickly, like a flicker. Maybe it was nothing, but for the first time I felt a strange discomfort in my own home. That night, after she left, I mentioned it lightly. "She's been dressing up more lately, hasn't she?" Adil smiled, not looking up from his phone. "She's always been like that. You know her?" I laughed it off. Because what else could I do? Jealousy wasn't in my nature. Or at least, that's what I believed. A few weeks later, I noticed something else. Small, unexplainable things. Adil's sudden insistence on client dinners. The way Nita would mention places he'd supposedly been for work. Her often comments like, "Oh, Adil told me about that project," when I hadn't heard a word of it. Once I even joked, "You talk to my husband more than I do." And she laughed. A little too quickly. "Sana, please. He's like a brother." I remember those words so clearly now, like a brother. I wish I hadn't believed them. One rainy Friday evening, I was driving home from my studio when I saw them. At first, it didn't register. A car pulled up at the signal ahead, Adil's car, and there she was in the passenger seat, laughing. It was a quick glimpse. Her hand brushing his arm, his face lit with a smile I hadn't seen in months. Then the light changed and they drove off. I sat there in the rain, frozen, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. I wanted to chase after them, demand an explanation, but I didn't. Instead, I went home, changed into my pajamas, and told myself that maybe she had just needed a ride. Maybe, because it's easier to live with doubt than with the truth. That was the night before I found her perfume on his collar. And after that, everything changed. Sometimes betrayal doesn't crash into your life. It seeps in, quiet as a whisper, until the walls you built start crumbling from within. After that night with the perfume on his collar, something inside me shifted. I couldn't look at Adil the same way. Every word, every gesture, every late-night text made me pause. He didn't notice, or maybe he did, and counted on my silence. We went about our days as if nothing had changed. Breakfast, work, dinner, sleep. But beneath the ordinary rhythm I began watching, listening. That's the thing about intuition, it's not loud. It hums softly, like a note under your skin, until it becomes unbearable to ignore. A week later, Adil mentioned he had to travel to Islamabad for a conference. 3 days, he said, avoiding my eyes as he packed his suitcase. Same team as usual, I asked casually, folding his shirts. He nodded, but his tone was clipped. I didn't press further. When he left, I told myself to let it go, to trust him like I always had. But that night, as I was cleaning our room, I noticed something strange. His cologne, the one he never traveled without, was still on the dresser. Adil was meticulous when it came to packing. He never forgot essentials. Yet there it was, sitting right where he left it. I stood there staring at it, my chest tightening. It wasn't proof, not yet. But it was enough to plant a seed of unease that wouldn't stop growing. The next evening, I met Nita. She called out of nowhere, cheerful, saying she'd been dying to catch up. We met at our usual cafe, the one where the waiters knew our order by heart. When I walked in, she waved, her smile bright as ever. Sana, over here. She looked radiant, glowing skin, a new handbag, her hair styled in soft curls. I wanted to ask where she'd been, but her energy disarmed me. We chatted about my art students, her job, random gossip, but something felt off. Her laughter was louder, her stories more rehearsed. At one point she mentioned, Islamabad's lovely this time of year. My heart skipped. I hadn't told her Adil was there, and she hadn't been to Islamabad in months, or so she'd said. I stirred my tea slowly, keeping my voice calm. Really? Were you there recently? She blinked, just a fraction too long before smiling. Oh, no, just saying. My colleague went last week. Her eyes flickered, a small, betraying movement. She quickly changed the subject, but my hands were trembling beneath the table. I smiled through it, pretended to listen, but my mind was already elsewhere. Rewinding, replaying, piecing together fragments I had ignored. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, watching rain streak down the glass, my thoughts spiraling. Images flashed. Her perfume, her laughter in his car, her knowing glances. I wanted to be wrong. I prayed I was. But a small, quiet voice inside whispered, you already know. The next morning, I did something I'd never done before. I checked Adil's study. It felt invasive. Wrong even, but my heart wouldn't let me rest. I opened drawers, looked through folders, pretending I was just tidying up. That's when I saw it. A small, pale pink envelope tucked behind his laptop case. No name, no address. Just a faint trace of jasmine. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a note. Short, written in neat cursive. Last night was perfect. I can still hear your laugh. Don't worry, she'll never find out. No signature. But I didn't need one. The handwriting, the perfume, everything screamed Nita. My chest felt hollow. My knees gave way and I sat on the edge of his chair, the letter trembling in my hand. I remember staring at the words until they blurred with tears. Perfect. She'll never find out. That's when I realized. It wasn't about what I didn't know anymore. It was about what I would do with what I knew. I didn't confront him immediately, not because I was weak, but because I wanted to be sure. Pain has a way of sharpening your instincts. You stop reacting. You start observing. So, I waited. I watched him answer calls in the other room. I listened to his tone change when he thought I wasn't near. I noticed how often he smiled at his phone now, and I kept quiet. If there's one thing I learned in those days, it's that silence can be more powerful than anger. It makes guilty people nervous. One evening, as he was showering, his phone lit up on the nightstand. A message. Just one word, miss you. No name. Just a heart emoji. My throat tightened. I didn't need to. Because sometimes the smallest proof carries the loudest truth. When he came out, towel slung over his shoulder, I smiled. "How was the trip?" I asked lightly. He hesitated. A small flicker before he said, "Good. Productive." I nodded, pretending to believe him. But inside I felt something settle. Not peace, not yet, but certainty. The next day I called Nita again. She didn't pick up. I tried once more. Nothing. Then, late at night, she finally texted, "Sorry, busy day. We'll call you tomorrow. Love you. Love you." That word felt different now. Heavier, dishonest. I stared at the message, and for the first time in years, I didn't reply. The world around me continued. My students painted. The city buzzed. The sun rose and set. But I moved through it like a shadow. I stopped going to the cafe, stopped answering her calls. I needed space, not to forgive, but to understand. How long had it been happening? How did two people I trusted the most find comfort in betraying me? The questions clawed at me day and night. Until one evening, I got the answer I wasn't ready for. It was a Sunday. Adel said he was going to visit his mother. I offered to come, but he refused gently. "She's not feeling well," he said. "I'll just check on her quickly." He left around 4 p.m. By 5, I got a call. From his mother. "Betta," she said, confused, "is everything okay? I was waiting for you too." I felt my pulse quicken. "You mean Adel isn't there?" "No, dear. I haven't seen him since last week." I hung up, my hands trembling. And that's when it hit me. Whatever was hidden was no longer just suspicion. It was alive, breathing, right under my roof. The truth, when it finally comes, doesn't knock politely. Bursts in, tearing through whatever illusions you've carefully built to protect yourself. That night, after Adel left under the lie of visiting his mother, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just sat there, still, cold, listening to the ticking clock echo in my chest. Then I picked up my car keys. I didn't have a plan. I only had instinct, and instinct whispered her name. Nita lived about 20 minutes away in a quiet apartment complex near Goldberg. As I drove, rain began to fall, slow, steady, relentless. The kind that blurs everything beyond the windshield. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly. I wasn't sure what I'd do when I got there. Confront them? Spy? Walk away? But by the time I pulled up near her building, my heart already knew the answer. Her car was parked outside, and next to it, Adil's. My breath caught. For a moment I just sat there staring through the fogged windshield, feeling my world tilt out of place. I don't know how long I sat there. Minutes, maybe hours. Until a flicker of light from her balcony pulled me out of the fog. A shadow moved across the curtain, tall, familiar. Then another. 2 silhouettes. One reached for the other. That was all I needed to see. I stepped out of the car, the rain soaking through my clothes instantly. Every sound felt amplified. The slap of my shoes on the pavement, the pounding of my heart, the hum of electricity in the streetlights. At her door I hesitated. My hand hovered over the bell, shaking. Then, without thinking, I turned the handle. It opened. She never locked it. She never needed to. Inside, the apartment was warm, softly lit, candles, music playing faintly in the background. The scent of jasmine filled the air so thick it made me nauseous. And there they were, Adel, Nita. On the couch, close, too close, his hand resting on her knee, her fingers grazing his. They weren't kissing, not yet, but they didn't have to. The intimacy in that small space between them said everything. The air went still. Nita saw me first. Her eyes widened, not in guilt, but shock. The kind that comes when your secret is suddenly stripped naked. Adel turned, his face draining of color. "Sana," he whispered. The sound of my name on his lips made something inside me break. For a moment, none of us moved. The rain outside grew louder, drumming against the windows like an audience holding its breath. I don't remember what I expected to say. Maybe I thought words would come naturally, but they didn't. My voice was quiet when it finally did. "How long?" Nita's lips parted, but no sound came out. Adel looked down. "It's not what you think," he muttered. I laughed, a small, hollow sound that didn't feel like my own. "Then tell me what it is, Adel. Enlighten me." He stood up, fumbling for words. "Way it just happened. I didn't mean for." "Don't you dare!" I cut him off. "Don't you dare say it just happened." I turned to Nita. She still sat frozen, her eyes glossy with tears. "I trusted you," I said, my voice trembling. "You were my sister, Nita. You slept on my couch. You held my hand when I buried my father." She shook her head quickly, crying now. "Sana, please, I didn't. I never meant to hurt you. It wasn't supposed to." I let out a bitter laugh. "You didn't mean to hurt me. You were in my house, Nita, wearing your perfume on my husband's shirt." Her face crumpled. "He told me you two were. That things weren't." "Don't finish that sentence," I said sharply. Don't you dare tell me what he told you about us. You of all people knew what we had. You saw it. You envied it. Adel stepped closer. Santa, please. I turned to him, eyes burning. No, Adel, you don't get to talk now. You don't get to say my name like you still have that right. He flinched. For a moment the only sound was the rain. Then I did something I didn't expect. I smiled. Not out of peace, not out of forgiveness, but realization. I looked around that room at the candles, the music, the faint smell of jasmine, and thought, this is what you traded our life for. I hope it was worth it, I said quietly. I turned to leave, but Nita grabbed my wrist. Her hand was cold, trembling. Santa, please don't go like this. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I looked at her hand on mine. The same hand that once wiped my tears, held my coffee, braided my hair before my wedding. And then I pulled away? You didn't just take my husband, Nita, I said. You killed every memory that ever meant anything to me. I walked out before either of them could stop me. The rain had slowed to a drizzle when I reached my car. I sat there, drenched, shaking, not from cold, but from the realization that my life, as I knew it, was over. Tears came quietly. They weren't wild or loud. Just slow, exhausted tears that tasted of salt and endings. When I finally drove home, the house felt different, emptier, haunted by laughter that wasn't mine anymore. I went to our bedroom, opened his closet, and packed a single bag, his. Every shirt, every tie, every trace of him went inside. When I was done, I placed the pink envelope on top. Then I texted him, "Your things are packed. You can collect them tomorrow. Don't come tonight." No anger, no begging, just closure. He replied once, hours later. "I'm sorry, Santa," and I stared at the message unreadable, and then deleted it. That night I slept on the couch, not because I couldn't face the bed, but because I needed to start reclaiming space. My space, it wasn't peace. Not yet, but it was the first breath of something close to it. The next morning, Nita came to my doorstep. Her eyes were swollen, makeup smeared. "Santa, please," she whispered. "Just let me explain." I opened the door halfway. "Explain what, Nita?" "That you fell in love with him. That you betrayed the one person who would have done anything for you." Her voice broke. "I made a mistake. I thought he cared about me. But he doesn't. He used us both." I wanted to believe her. Part of me even pitied her. But some betrayals carve wounds too deep to ever fully heal. "I hope you find peace," I said softly. "But not here." And I closed the door. Inside, I stood in silence for a long time. The jasmine scent still lingered faintly in the air, clinging stubbornly to the corners of my home. So I lit a candle, lavender, my favorite, and watched its flame flicker to life. For the first time in weeks, the house didn't feel suffocating. It just felt mine. The day after I closed the door on Nita, the world felt strangely quiet. Not peaceful, just still, like life had paused to see what I would do next. Adel hadn't come home. I knew he wouldn't. Cowardice doesn't walk back through the same door it destroyed. By afternoon, I heard the sound of tires outside. Through the window, I saw his car pull up. He stepped out slowly, head down, as if afraid of being seen. He looked older somehow, smaller even. I didn't go to the door. I just stood there, waiting for the inevitable knock. It came soft at first, then again more insistent. I opened it halfway, enough to look him in the eye, but not enough to invite him in. "Santa," he began, his voice cracked and thin. I said nothing. He took a slow breath. "I'm sorry. I know nothing I say can undo it, but Stop!" I said, my tone calm. Too calm. "You don't get to start this conversation with 'I'm sorry.' You don't even understand what you took from me." He looked at me then. Really looked. And for the first time in 12 years I saw fear in his eyes. Not fear of losing me, but fear of facing what he had done. "I made a mistake," he whispered. "Mistake," I repeated, my voice trembling with quiet rage. "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary, Adel. A mistake is coming home late without calling. What you both did was a choice." He swallowed hard. "She meant nothing. I swear, it just—" I laughed bitterly. "You don't betray someone for nothing. You don't destroy a marriage for nothing." He opened his mouth again, but I raised my hand. Don't try to explain what can't be justified." The silence that followed was heavy. He looked around the house like he didn't recognize it anymore. Maybe because it wasn't his home now. I pointed toward the bag I had packed. "Your things are there." He hesitated. "Santa, please. I'll fix this. I'll end it with her. I'll do anything." My chest tightened, but my voice stayed steady. "You already ended it, Adel. The moment you crossed that line, it ended. You just didn't have the courage to admit it." He looked like he might cry, but I didn't want his tears. Not after all the nights I had cried alone while he was in her arms. "Leave," I said quietly. "Santa, please. I have nowhere to go right now. Then go to her, I said. You've already built that home in secret. Go live in it. He stepped back, speechless. For the first time in years, I saw what power looked like, not loud, not cruel, but absolute. When the door closed behind him, I didn't collapse this time. I exhaled, deeply, fully, as if I'd been holding my breath for months. The next few days passed in fragments. I went to my studio. My students noticed my silence but didn't ask questions. I painted long, abstract strokes of color that looked like chaos on the canvas but somehow made sense inside me. Nita stopped calling. Adel didn't text again. And though the pain still lived in me, something else began to take root. Clarity. One evening I met Adel's mother at the market. Her eyes softened when she saw me. "Beta," she said, holding my hand. "Told me everything." I looked away. "I didn't want to cause you shame, Auntie." She shook her head, her voice trembling. "You have nothing to be ashamed of. He's the one who lost everything. I raised him better than that." For a moment, her words felt like balm. Then she added softly, "He's been staying with a friend. He looks terrible. He keeps saying he doesn't know why he did it." I smiled faintly. "He knows. He just doesn't want to face it." She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "You'll always be my daughter, Sana. No matter what happens." That meant more than she could imagine. Back home, I sat in the quiet and thought about forgiveness. Not the kind that excuses. The kind that frees. Because forgiveness isn't about letting the other person off the hook. It's about letting yourself unclench your fists. I wasn't ready yet, but I wanted to be someday. That night, I took out my wedding photo album. I thought it would break me, seeing those smiles again, his arm around me, her laughing beside us in one of the photos. But instead, I felt detached. Like I was looking at strangers. People who didn't know what love required. A week later, I went to the cafe, our old spot, mine and Nita's. I hadn't been there since everything happened. The waiter recognized me. "Long time, ma'am," he said kindly. "Your usual table?" I nodded. I sat by the window, sipped my tea, and watched life move on outside. Couples walking, children laughing, the sky turning soft gold before dusk. For the first time, I felt a strange sense of calm. I had survived the worst, and I was still here. That night, as I closed the studio, I received a message from an unknown number. "Sana, it's me. I just wanted to say I understand now. I ruined everything. I don't expect forgiveness, but I'll regret it for the rest of my life." I read it twice. It could have been from either of them. I didn't care to know. I deleted it. Some words don't deserve to live in your phone or in your heart. 2 months passed. The loneliness was still there, yes, but it was quieter now. It didn't sting the same way. I started redecorating the house, new curtains, new colors, a new scent. Lavender instead of jasmine. One evening, while rearranging the living room, I found a small box under the coffee table. A birthday gift Nita had once given me. Inside was a silver bracelet engraved with the words, "Sisters by Heart." I smiled sadly, then closed it and placed it in a drawer. Some memories you don't throw away, you just put them to rest. By spring, the studio was thriving. I poured myself into my work, helping my students prepare for an exhibition. Their art reflected pieces of me, broken but beautiful, raw but alive. And for the first time, I felt proud, not of surviving the betrayal, but of choosing myself after it. When truth finally leaves the shadows, it doesn't arrive with fireworks. It seeps out through whispers, glances, and the awkward silences that fill a room before someone says too much. That's how it started. One of Adel's cousins worked at the same bank where Nita had her account. People talk, especially in small circles where curiosity moves faster than shame. Within a month, everyone knew. Not the tabloid version. The real one, that my best friend. The woman who had stood beside me through heartbreaks and birthdays, had been secretly sleeping with my husband. At first, I dreaded it. The thought of becoming that story. The one whispered about over tea. Dissected by neighbors who pretended to care. But surprisingly, when the gossip began, I didn't feel humiliated. I felt done. There was nothing left to hide, nothing left to defend. It was a Sunday when my mother called. Her tone was calm, but I could hear the tightness underneath. "Sana, I heard about Adel," she said softly. "People are talking." "I know," I replied. She paused. "Are you okay?" I hesitated, looking at the sunlight spilling across the kitchen floor. "I'm not broken anymore, Ami," I said quietly. "Just lighter." She exhaled, long and trembling. "I raised you to be strong, but I wish you never had to prove it this way." That night, her words stayed with me. Strength born from pain isn't something to envy. A few days later, the art school hosted our annual exhibition. It was my first major event since everything happened, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to face the crowd. But life doesn't wait until you're ready. It keeps moving, even when you're limping behind it. The hall smelled faintly of paint and lilies. My students had done beautifully. Their canvases lined the walls, each one pulsing with color and emotion. As guests arrived, I saw familiar faces, colleagues, parents, even a few friends I hadn't spoken to in months. Their smiles carried both admiration and quiet sympathy. Then, in the middle of the crowd, I saw her. Nita, standing near the entrance, hesitant, unsure, her hair tied up the same way she always did when she wanted to look composed. But her eyes gave her away, swollen, tired, remorseful. For a heartbeat, the room blurred. All the noise faded into a dull hum. She caught my gaze, then took a step forward. People turned, recognizing her. Whispers rippled across the hall. I could have walked away. I could have had her escorted out. But I didn't. I stayed still. She came closer, her voice barely audible. "Sana." I didn't respond. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry," she said, her tone shaking. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I needed to see you once to say it." Her eyes filled with tears. "You were the best friend I ever had, and I destroyed it." Around us, people pretended not to watch, but they were listening. I looked at her, really looked. And for the first time, I didn't see my friend. I saw a stranger wearing the face of someone I used to love. My voice came out soft, steady. "I believed you were my sister, Nita, and you used that belief to stab me in the back. I can't hate you. I tried, but I can't. Because hate keeps you tied to what hurt you." She blinked rapidly, tears falling. "Then what will you do?" "I'll let you go," I said. "That's my forgiveness." The room fell silent. She nodded slowly, as if accepting a sentence she already knew she deserved. Then she turned and left. The whispers grew louder after that, but they no longer mattered. Because that night, when people looked at me, they didn't see a woman betrayed. They saw a woman who stood in her truth and didn't crumble. Weeks later, Adel's mother visited again. She brought fruit, like she always used to, and sat in the same chair by the window. "He came to see me," she said after a long pause. "He's not doing well, Sana. He's lost weight, left his job. He says he can't sleep." I folded my hands. "That's his journey, Auntie. I can't walk it for him anymore." She nodded, her eyes moist. "I understand. But I want you to know, I told everyone the truth. You did nothing wrong." I smiled faintly. "Thank you. But I don't need the world to clear my name anymore. I know who I am." That seemed to move her deeply. She reached out and held my hand. "You're stronger than I ever was." Life has a way of reordering itself after chaos. People stopped asking questions. The whispers died out, and in their place there was quiet respect, the kind that follows dignity. At the market, at school events, at neighborhood gatherings, people greeted me warmly. Not with pity, but with admiration. They'd say things like, "You handled it with such grace." Or, "You showed everyone what real strength looks like." It didn't heal everything, but it helped. Because sometimes justice isn't loud. It's quiet. The kind that lets the truth speak for itself. Months later, I saw Adel again. It was at a friend's funeral, a shared acquaintance from our old social circle. He looked older, wary. When our eyes met across the courtyard, he gave a small, uncertain nod. I returned it. That was all. No anger, no longing, just acknowledgement. We were two people who had once loved, hurt, and destroyed each other in different ways, but who could now exist in the same space without bleeding. And that, I realized, was its own kind of closure. Spring melted into summer before I realized it. The house was quieter now, yet it didn't feel empty, it felt mine. For months, I had lived in the echo of what used to be. His footsteps in the hallway, her laughter in my memories. But now, when I walked through my home, I no longer heard ghosts. I heard silence, and silence, I learned, can be gentle if you stop fearing it. One morning, I brewed coffee and opened the windows wide. The sunlight poured in like forgiveness. I watched dust motes swirl lazily in the air and thought, maybe this is what healing looks like. Nothing dramatic, just the absence of pain where it used to live. My art became my companion. Every brushstroke was a sentence I hadn't spoken, every color a feeling I had refused to name. The more I painted, the lighter I became. At the gallery exhibition in June, my students surprised me. They had dedicated the show to me. On the front banner, written in clean white letters, were the words, "To Miss Sana, who taught us that beauty can rise from brokenness." When I read that line, I had to look away to hide my tears. Not out of sadness, but because I finally understood what I had gained from everything I lost. Pain had stripped me down to my bare self, but from there I had rebuilt. Not the old version of me who sought validation, but a new one, softer, wiser, whole. One evening as I walked home from the gallery, the sky turned golden. The streets were filled with children chasing ice cream trucks, laughter echoing between houses. I stopped at a small flower shop I used to visit with Nita. The shopkeeper recognized me instantly. "It's been a long time," she said gently. "You used to come with your friend." I smiled, the kind that carries 1,000 stories but speaks none. "Yes, a long time ago." She wrapped my bouquet in brown paper and handed it to me. "Still jasmine?" she asked.
Yeah.
I hesitated, then I shook my head. "Lavender, please." She smiled knowingly. New beginnings then. Back home, I placed the lavender on my kitchen table. Its scent filled the air. Calming, pure, grounded. As I sat there, I thought about everything that had happened, the betrayal, the silence, the confrontation, the whispers. And for the first time, I didn't replay it with anger or pain. I just saw it as a chapter. One that had taught me who I was when the world around me crumbled. People think betrayal destroys you. It doesn't. It reveals you. It shows you whether you'll crumble into bitterness or rise into clarity. I chose clarity. 2 months later, I received an email from a women's collective that had heard about my story through one of my students. They invited me to speak at a seminar on emotional resilience, to share how art had helped me heal after betrayal. I hesitated at first. I wasn't sure if I was ready to talk about it publicly. But something inside me whispered, maybe your pain can be someone else's map. At the seminar, I stood on a small stage in front of 50 women, all different ages, faces lined with stories of their own. I began softly. I used to think strength meant staying silent, smiling through the storm, pretending everything was fine. But I learned that real strength isn't silence, it's the courage to speak, to walk away, to start again. The room was quiet, attentive. I told them about my friend, my husband, the betrayal, and the long road back to myself. But I didn't speak with bitterness, I spoke with grace. When I finished, there was no applause at first, just a stillness. Then a woman in the front row whispered, "Thank you." And one by one, others nodded, some with tears in their eyes. That's when I realized something profound. Healing doesn't just end with you. It extends outward, quietly lighting the paths of those who come after. That night, I came home and stood by the window, watching the moon hang low over the city. I thought of Nita and Adil, wherever they were. I didn't wish them pain. I didn't wish them happiness either. I just wished them understanding. Because that's what I had earned. The understanding that love, no matter how deep, cannot survive without trust. And trust, once broken, doesn't rebuild the same way. But you can. Weeks passed. Life became steady again. Not the kind of steady that comes from routine, but from peace. I started taking small weekend trips, visiting art festivals, meeting new people. And though I wasn't looking for love, I started to believe that one day it might find me again, not as a rescue but as an equal. Until then, I was content with my own company, my coffee, my paint, my quiet mornings, my lavender. Because peace, I learned, isn't something you find in others. It's what you build inside yourself when everything else falls away. One evening, as I locked up the studio, a new student approached me. She was young, shy, and soft-spoken. "Miss Santa," she said, "I read about your story in the magazine. I just wanted to say you give me hope." Her words caught me off guard. "Hope?" I asked. She nodded. "That it's okay to start over, even after everything." I smiled, really smiled this time. "Yes," I said. "It's not just okay. It's necessary." She left, and I stood there in the fading light, the air warm against my skin. Somewhere deep inside, a part of me that had been asleep for a long time finally stirred awake. And in that moment, I knew I had not lost everything. I had simply returned to myself. There's something people don't tell you about betrayal. It doesn't just end a relationship. It ends the version of you that trusted without question, that loved without armor. But what comes after, that's where the real story begins. For a long time, I thought my life was over, that losing my best friend and my husband at once would leave me hollow. But standing here now, I see it differently. They didn't take my life. They just forced me to rebuild it from the truth. And maybe that's the strange mercy hidden inside heartbreak. You stop chasing what's false. You stop begging to be understood by those who were never listening. You start walking your own road, even if you limp at first. If I could go back, I wouldn't erase what happened. Because every tear, every sleepless night, every moment I doubted my worth, it all led me here. To strength, to peace, to me. So if you're listening right now, and someone you loved has broken your heart, I want you to know this: you will heal. Not all at once, not easily, but you will. And one day, you'll look back and realize the person you became after the storm is someone you never would have met without it. Because sometimes life doesn't take from you to punish you. It takes from you to make space. For something real, something whole, something yours. Now tell me, if you discovered that your best friend had been secretly your partner's lover, would you confront them, or would you simply walk away? Let me know what your heart says in the comments. And remember, your peace is your power.